Many people have tried to define the word oppression. The dictionary defines it as prolonged, cruel, or unjust treatment or control of a certain category of people, usually by a governmental authority. And while that's a good way to sum it up, oppression is so much more than that. It's an abstract concept that can't be explained fully in one sentence, which is why it's harder for a lot of people to understand, especially those who come from positions of privilege. Although countless popular works of art over the years have attempted to address this theme, they've rarely prompted a long lasting, serious national conversation about the topic.
People don't really like to talk about oppression because it makes them uncomfortable. And maybe one form of oppression is making sure that they stay uncomfortable, stay silent. Because if you ask me, the real definition of oppression is this: an image of two people standing apart, arguing about some issue, while the person who it's really affecting, who's really struggling, is forced to sit on the sidelines and watch from afar, failing to make their voice heard.
A more important question than what is oppression would be, how do we talk about oppression? And I think that's one thing we as a culture haven't quite figured out yet. In the US, we live on a piece of stolen land developed by stolen people, and yet we still have people who believe that America was built on the foundation of equality. We live in a country where black people and Latinos make up a minority of the population, but are several times more likely to be arrested or summarily executed than white people. And yet we still have people who think that the justice system requires no reform and that the criminals are the ones to blame. We live in a country where one party can publicly admit to needing to suppress the minority vote in order to win, and yet we still have people who think that everyone of all races is represented in our government. Stock that up to maliciousness or ignorance or faith in the system that continues to benefit them, but whatever the reason, these people exist. They're your neighbors, your friends, your family. Let me give you a real life example. When I lived in North Carolina, I used to attend a small private K through 12 school. Just part of my privileged upbringing, I guess. And when I was in 8th grade, I joined the debate club. It was in 2017, I believe, a few months into the controversial Trump administration, and you could feel a different atmosphere in the room. As much as everyone wanted to avoid discussing politics and focus on the more important topics at hand, like whether a hot dog counts as a sandwich, the issue was inevitably brought up.
We mostly kept our cool until we got into a pretty heated, intense conversation about Black Lives Matter, where everybody seemed to be on the same page about it, except for this kid named Nick. Now, up until now, I liked Nick. I thought he was pretty funny. I respected him. But as these words came out of his mouth, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. 13-year-old me was shocked to discover that someone in the seemingly welcoming community could hold these prejudiced views. But as I looked around, I realized something. There was not a single black person sitting in that room to give us that alternate perspective. Here we were, a group of young, upper middle class, white, liberal suburbanites arguing about something we had little to no experience with, that we knew nothing about. At that moment, I didn't feel bad for Nick or for the teacher moderating that debate. I felt bad for any black person that might be listening outside that door, hearing a bunch of white people talking amongst themselves about how much value his life has in this country. But that thought alone was not enough to radicalize me. I still needed perspective. Well, over the summer, I gained that perspective.
I am Jewish. My father was raised Irish Catholic, but my mother was born Jewish, and Judaism is passed matrilineally, so I inherited that from her. I'd always been proud of being Jewish, even after citing early on that I wasn't invested in the religious side of things after quitting Sunday school. I still wanted to keep that a part of me, because Judaism is more than just a faith, it's a cultural identity. And I guess, like many others, I wanted to belong to something. So I celebrate some of the holidays, mainly Passover and Hanukkah, and I use some of the fun slang. but I had never thought of myself as a minority until recently. After hearing about all those celebrities who posted blatantly anti Semitic things on their social media and went mostly unpunished for it, and seeing pictures of Jewish cemeteries that had been defaced, I became more aware of the oppression my people still face in this country today, an oppression that the average person may overlook. And I responded to a specific situation in the way that I usually do, with humor.
Anti-Semitism? Okay, kinda fresh, kinda spicy.
And the video unexpectedly blew up. And when I checked the comments section, I saw this. And this one. Now, these comments didn't bother me so much, it was nothing I hadn't heard before, but then things really escalated. After that, I immediately reported all of his comments and the account as a whole, and I got all of my friends to do it too.
I wasn't doing this for myself. I was doing it for any of the other young Jewish kids who might come across that comment in the future and be hurt by it. But after that whole fiasco, TikTok never took the account down. That guy is probably still out there, continuing to spew that hateful shit today, and nothing I say or do is likely to change anything about that. I couldn't believe that after years of staying silent about my Jewish identity, the moment I came forward, shared how I felt, my perspective, I was confronted with nothing but bigotry and hatred, while the people who had the power to put a stop to it ignored my cry for help. And I realized that on that day, on some level, I had experienced a type of oppression, a tiny, tiny sliver of what a lot of other people in this country come face to face with every day of their lives. So, how do we stop oppression? Well, it's never that easy. The way the system is set up in this country, any progress that occurs is going to be slow and incremental, and there's not much we can do about that. But what we can do is open up a conversation with our fellow Americans and actually listen to the people who are struggling rather than casting them aside. So that one day, maybe that person doesn't have to listen from outside the door or watch from the sidelines, but maybe they can be a part of the conversation. So that one day that person will be able to speak their truth without being dismissed out of hand or silence. So that one day no one feels left behind or abandoned by their own community and like their voice doesn't matter. They should be able to share that voice freely, because I think we could all use their voice. We could all use a little perspective.